All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It is 2:04 p.m., and I call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. I'll call the roll, please.
Ms. Clementi? Ms. Clementi?
It just said she left the meeting.
Perfect timing.
You want to go down the line? It just said she left the meeting.
Perfect timing.
You want to go down the line?
Barb, it looks like you're muted. Can you try to unmute?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm here.
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Judge Mays?
Here.
Mr. Voss?
Here.
Dr. Wright?
Here.
Superintendent Macaluso, do you have any corrections or modifications to the agenda?
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, there are no corrections or modifications to the agenda.
Then I will move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
I'll call the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi?
Aye.
Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright?
Aye.
And with that, we'll move into our work session, starting with the school operations update.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Assistant Superintendent Suzanne Maury, and she's going to provide us a brief update regarding how the operation of our schools is going. Ms. Maury?
Thank you. President Voss, Superintendent Macaluso, members of the board, with the rapidly changing context of COVID-19, I wanted to take some time today to update you on our COVID response procedures, as well as some of the proactive measures we've recently put in place across our district. But first, I wanted to start by saying that even with the increase in COVID cases here in Pueblo, I believe our schools are doing an excellent job cohorting our students, particularly at the elementary and middle school levels. And this has allowed us to limit the number of adults and students needing to be quarantined when we do have a positive case that comes into our schools. Our teachers are really doing a very commendable job of reinforcing student wearing of masks, the social distancing, implementing one-way hallways, keeping cohorts separate during lunches and recess times, using seating charts even at the high school level. And this really helps us to be very accurate with contact tracing. Our school administrators are keeping explicit records of anyone exhibiting symptoms. And I cannot say enough about the outstanding and very time-intensive job our district human resources and student support services team is doing in working with the health department daily to conduct contact tracing and then make those important decisions along the way. So you should have two handouts in your board docs today. I'm going to be starting with the document titled Revised Social Distancing Guidelines. And I am going to share my screen now so that everybody can see that document. Okay, it should be up for everybody. So with the increase of positive COVID cases across the state and then also here in Pueblo, and after meeting multiple times with the Pueblo County Health Department, D60 made the decision to revise our social distancing recommendations for our staff across the whole district. So all of our departments as well as all of our schools in order to mitigate further exposure. And so some of those components are, we're really asking our adults to meet virtually whenever possible. So not only the larger staff meetings, but also the small group meetings, our PLCs, our building leadership teams, department meetings, even a one-on-one conversation, if it's going to be for an extended period of time. We're really asking that those be held virtually now. Also, in order to minimize exposure when masks are off, we're asking adults not to eat lunch together and to avoid those potlucks and those sort of things. Our lounges are still open because we have microwaves and refrigerators and all sorts of things that our staff uses. But we are asking to limit the lunches and other social interactions to very brief periods of time. We're also saying that even if you're outdoors, socializing outdoors on our school campuses during school events, that if at all possible, please keep the masks on, keep that social distancing in place, even outdoors. And then lastly, just to limit sharing materials. So even those things like candy jars where people are sharing and putting their hands in the jars, just avoid those sharing of materials and articles and utensils and that sort of thing. It also does just remind everybody that we are very limited in volunteers and visitors in our buildings. That's always been in place, but it's always a good reminder. The last thing I wanted to share that's not on this actual document, but is related to social distancing is recently Mr. Macias, our district athletic director, issued a moratorium on out of season athletic practices. So for those sports that are not currently in season, often our kids do practice even out of season, and that is now been stopped, at least for the time being, in order to reduce potential exposure. So next, I am going to move us to look at the document. It's called Distance Learning Transition Plan, because in the event that our high schools, middle schools, and or elementary schools would need to transition to a fully distance learning model, we wanted to be sure that every one of our schools, all the adults, all the students would be prepared. And so the purpose of this document is to describe what this transition, what this change will look like if and when we need to transition to fully distance learning. So it includes the instructional schedules, guidelines for staff, and even some of the initial school preparations that we're recommending at this time. This first part in bold does just remind all of us that we have to stay flexible. And so although this describes the schedule, for example, that we would move to, we do need to know that we may have changing local or state health and safety guidelines. We may observe a need to make some shifts and small tweaks based on the academic, social, or emotional needs of students and families. And so we always keep that in the back of our mind, the importance of being flexible. So key descriptors here, I think you already are aware, all of our K-12 students have their own technology device. They've been taking those back and forth from school to home so that they're available. We will continue to work with families. We, in terms of internet services, we just got a large order in of additional hotspots. So that was perfect timing for us. All of our K-12 students every day in this model would spend some time online with synchronous learning, that learning with their teachers right in front of them on the screen, and then sometimes during the day in asynchronous independent learning activities. We'll continue to use Google Classroom, and then Google Meet is what we used for those synchronous learning invites. If Pueblo County is under a safer at home orange order, so right now, we are at a safer at home, what used to be called level 2, yellow, but now they're just using colors. So if we move up on that dial one step to a safer at home orange order, staff would report to work even if students at a particular level are working from home. Staff would report to work and teachers would instruct virtually from their classrooms. This is important because we've learned a lot from our online teachers so far, and having things like dock cameras available, an extra monitor if available, all those curriculum materials, copiers, printers, access to district phones, reliable internet service, all really critically important And so if we're in a safer at home orange, our staff would report to work and teach from their classrooms. We also had a long discussion and talked about if there is a situation where a teacher or a staff member has a hardship, a daycare hardship, and even after exploring different possibilities, they would like to request to bring a preschool through 8th grade aged student to work with them. There to bring that to the attention of their direct supervisor, their principal. And if it's a situation where we could isolate the parent and the student in a particular room, and the parent would be able to directly supervise their own child, this is a request that we might be able to make. And so we would try to do that if there is a hardship situation. Lastly, if Pueblo County moves to that highest end of the dial, a stay-at-home red order, then staff, of course, will be working from home and teachers instructionally virtually from their home environment. Next, I'm going to move us to the overall schedule. This is very familiar to our elementary schools. We've already communicated this. You'll see in general, our K2 students work synchronously with their teacher in the morning, and then the afternoon times are spent on independent lessons, small group lessons, reading interventions, extra support for special education students, second language learners, and so forth. There's time for some student family check-in, time for teacher planning, so available. Our 3rd through 5th grade school. Our 3rd through 5th grade students would be working independently and in small group in the morning, and then with their whole class in the afternoon, focused on literacy and math lessons starting at 11:45. Our PE, art, music specialists will provide asynchronous lessons, grade level specific lessons online for students to access. And again, as I talked about, the ESS and CLDE intervention small groups would happen during those asynchronous times so that our students don't miss direct instruction with the rest of their class. And we will continue to support the social and emotional and counseling needs of our students, ideally, again, during those asynchronous learning times, but that would be handled on a case-by-case needed basis. 612. All of our middle school and high school students will follow their regular 6 or 7 period schedule. So whatever their exact school schedule is, that is the schedule that they'll follow. We are going to be having both our middle school and our high school follow the stage 1 instructional model, which I described in a previous board meeting. All the instruction will be virtual. On Mondays and Wednesdays, all 612 students will attend periods 1, 2, 3, 4 synchronously, and then work independently, asynchronously in periods 5, 6, 7. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, all 612 students would work independently, periods 1 through 4, and then synchronously with their teachers 5 through 7. And this allows a really great thing, and that our teachers will have some open, if you will, periods during the day that will be spent on providing differentiated small group instruction for their students on a needs basis, to be able to have office hours to reach out to families via the phone or online, to re-engage students as needed. So that's how that asynchronous time would be spent, how the teachers would spend their time. ESS, CLDE, synchronous small group instruction will happen as it's normally scheduled every day. We want to make sure that we meet the needs in all of our IEPs. Lunch will be taken by students and teachers at a designated time that the school identifies in accordance with their daily schedule. Teacher planning periods remain the same. PLCs remain the same. If an all school staff meeting needs to occur, it would occur at the normally Normally that's after school. Sometimes it's before school, depending on the particular school. And again, so critically important to continue to provide those social and emotional supports and counseling services to our students, which would happen during asynchronous times when possible. The next section, and I'm not going to go over this in detail, but it does outline some of the steps we asked our schools and teachers to make sure they were proactive about. And so they've been getting these pieces in place. Things like practicing with Google Classroom with the in-person elementary students who have not been used to that. Really getting them used to turning in online assignments and that sort of thing. Making sure we're reaching out to families to ensure they have internet, especially those in-person students who may not have needed it yet. Making sure every student has a technology device. Double checking our schedules to make sure they're going to work. And then lastly, we asked teachers to be very thoughtful about what consumable materials they may want to send home, or to do a drive-through pickup if there are additional consumable materials for our fully online students, just to make sure that they would be prepared in the event we would need to be home for an extended period of time with all the materials that they would need. We outlined a few other just reminders about best practice for online, just good reminders, especially for teachers at the elementary level who haven't been teaching online yet. And then lastly, we did make a decision after a long conversation and consultation with Mr. Macias that if the district transitioned to all students, kindergarten through 12th grade, all students to a distance learning model, that all in-person athletics, extracurricular activities, and events would also transition at a date specified and identified by the athletic department. We would transition to suspending in-person athletic and extracurricular events and practices and games and so forth. So that is our distance learning plan for K-12. And now I have asked Carrie Palumbo, our Executive Director of Elementary, to join us to share, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, to share what it will look like in the event that we need to transition our preschool students to learning at home. Carrie?
Good afternoon, President Voss, Superintendent Macaluso, and School Board. I'm going to share with you the plan for preschool should it become necessary for students to learn from home. While the Early Childhood Department promotes a curriculum of discovery and experiential learning, we recognize that it may become necessary to ensure that our students are served in the safety of their homes, and therefore, we've developed a plan keeping developmental needs in mind. The following measures will be enacted in the event that children need to learn from home. So first of all, we would send them home with individual pencil boxes with all the school supplies that they would need, crayons, pencils, glue, scissors, those types of things. And they would be necessary for children to complete the packets of take-home activities that we'll send home with each student. The packets would also be available online for any family who prefers that type of format, or any family who is unable to pick up the materials. Activities would address math, literacy, and social emotional development. Although packets have been created, we're looking at possible long-term solution, and workbooks with early reading and math activities have been ordered and will be distributed by the Early Childhood Department when they arrive. Parents will receive communication from their child's teacher through classroom newsletters, continued phone calls, and Google Meets online conferences. During these interactions with families, they would be suggesting activities addressing the physical, language, and cognitive development of their children. And finally, the Early Childhood Department is working on procuring iPads, just like older brothers and sisters have, and apps that would support the preschool curriculum. that they'll eventually be distributed to teachers and students. And the Early Childhood Department is working to develop and provide training in the effective uses of iPads as educational tools for early learners. And that's what we're doing right now for pre-K.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Colombo. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eric DeCicero. Eric is going to share the COVID data dashboard that he has posted and keeps updated on our website.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Macaluso, President Voss, and members of the board. We're going to now move into some information on the COVID response that we have in place and reporting processes that we are currently utilizing. I'm going to start by talking about our COVID dashboard that we've created. Next, after that, Mr. Bayer is going to discuss our processes when we have a COVID-related situation. And at the end of our presentation, we'll be able to answer questions that you may have related to the dashboard. Mr. Bayer can answer questions you may have about the processes for students in schools. Mr. Burns is also on the line and can answer any questions related to staff. And Mr. Sprouse can answer any questions related to communication. Okay, so we're going to start with the dashboard. I believe someone is going to pull it up for us so we can take a look at it.
Eric, who was going to pull that up? Is Dalton pulling that up?
I thought so. If not, I can do it maybe. Oh, you there? Oh, there we go.
Oh, there he goes. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Sprouse. So our COVID dashboard is located on our new district website. As you can see, Mr. Sprouse is pulling up that beautiful new website. It's located under our COVID-19 information as he gets there. And it loads. Our dashboard tracks students, staff, and cohorts that are out due to an isolation or quarantine. It also tracks current positive cases in our district. It shows our current totals and also has this same information broke down for our individual schools. It is a simple, straightforward dashboard that is easy to view. It works on both computers and mobile devices. We have also placed an external link, if you notice at the top of the page, just in case your browser won't open it. So everyone should be able to access it with one of these options. Our dashboard was created in-house, so it is not as comprehensive as maybe some of the ones that you've seen from the larger districts up north who paid or outsourced for their dashboards. We have a small staff, and updating the dashboard is a manual, labor-intensive process that does take a lot of time and does require somebody to physically do that each time we update it. But with the spirit of transparency, we're trying to be as transparent as possible with our dashboard, but there are also a lot of nuances to reporting this kind of data. Too much information leads to questions and can be too identifying, and not enough information also leads to questions. It's a fine line that all schools and districts are dealing with when reporting COVID information across the nation. For example, we have had several schools contact us and say their school communities were concerned that the dashboard showed a large number of staff being out when there really weren't that many teachers, for example, out that day. But we are also including all staff in the buildings on our dashboard, including nutrition staff and even athletic coaches who may not work at the school in any other capacity during the day, but they are still affiliated with the teams that they coach and the school. So we want to include that information as well. When we originally launched our dashboard, we committed to having it updated weekly. However, with the current uptake in cases in Pueblo County, we have been updating it daily, and in fact, sometimes more than once a day with the most current information that we have available at the time. And that's kind of the dashboard in a nutshell. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Baer, and he's going to report out on our processes.
Okay, good afternoon, Superintendent Macaluso, President Voss, members of the board. I'm going to talk to you, like Eric just mentioned, about the process we look at when we're considering potential quarantining of cohorts. This process is very extensive and elaborate, but it actually starts at the school level. It starts at the beginning of the day when the students show up to school and we're screening the students, and the initial screening and investigation forms are filled out with the needed data and information that is to be collected to help us out if something should arise. Mr. Burns takes the lead for the staff cases, and I take the lead when we're dealing with student cases. Usually this is kicked off by receiving information of a positive case. This could be either done through the health department notifying us that they have information of a positive case, or the school having information that there's a positive case out there that we need to investigate. We obtain confirmation of the positive case from the health department or family. This is all depending on where the person was tested, the type of test that was taken, when it was taken, but we can try to make sure we are confirming every single case. We are confirming every single case before we move forward. Then it moves into the investigation phase, where we work with the school to find out the names, the dates, the symptom onsets, the last day in class, who was impacted, to make sure we have the most information we could possibly have to make a good decision. We confer this information with the health department, and we identify a quarantine return date for that group that has potentially going to be quarantined. We assemble our district COVID-19 team, which is working, like Mrs. Macaluso said, around the clock and including weekends to make sure we are addressing these cases immediately. This team discusses which schools will be impacted, when they will be impacted, how long they'll be impacted, the individuals that will be impacted, and then the supports that will be needed to put in the supports that will be needed to be put in place to keep the school and the students moving forward. The school creates a line list, which is basically just contact information, names and phone numbers. This information is given to the communication department to create messaging that is going to go out. This messaging is vetted and sent out based on the line lists that were created. The line lists are also sent to the health department, where the health department begins their contact tracing. I just want to reemphasize that every move we make is in conjunction with the health department and using the dedicated team that they provided us to do School District 60. This is an elaborate and evolving process, but it is about keeping our students and our staff safe. That's all I got.
I think that is the end of our formal presentation, but all of the facilitators and anyone else on our district team who you might have questions for are here to answer any questions that you might have.
All right. Well, thank you for all that great information. Dr. Wright, we'll start with you.
Okay, first of all, Assistant Superintendent Maury and everyone else, this is so good to hear. Thank you so much, because there have been so many questions, in the community, and we do know it's unprecedented, but I'm very glad and very happy to see, that we're reporting the efforts that are going on in our schools. And it's very, very hard. Everyone knows that. You just don't go to the grocery store and come back without having passed several people. So we all, at any point, if we're out in the community, we're subject to be exposed. So thank you for helping relieve my mind of the processes that we're using with, I'll start from the bottom with the health department. And if I don't get your names right, please forgive me. I'm trying my best to look at notes and look at these faces on this grid here. But I just want to say thank you so much. I know it has to be difficult, washing, boards and keeping things clean and then trying to track people. And I know it impacts our education with teacher availability, staff availability. There's a whole lot you have to juggle when you're making changes. So I just want to say I appreciate it. We appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much. And my questions are just I would call tiny follow-up questions from things we've talked about before. And Assistant Superintendent, you've addressed several of the things that I had down here. So thank you also. I really appreciate how you also were able to accommodate teachers that are parents with children. Because again, that's an issue in the community. I have to work, but my child is at home, and so I'm so glad that with them communicating to their upline, they're able to work those things out. And I do appreciate the codes that we have and how you're keeping up with whether it's an orange code or yellow code. So again, and as you're saying, that's going to impact our transition, our services. So let's get to my questions. One, you remember we talked about Nearpod, and I know that one of the things we talked about was staff development, and way back at previous times, some were concerned.
So we have continued to provide to different.
That. So have they been able to update us on where they are with that use of the Nearpod?
So we have continued to provide to different groups, different Nearpod activities, and there's online modules that are available to everybody. We also did a principal training on Nearpod so that they are able then to sort of carry that information forward to each of their schools as well. So I feel pretty good about the opportunity to learn about Nearpod, to support each other. We even have some teacher groups who are meeting voluntarily after hours to work together to share strategies that we are helping to schedule. Two of our specialists are taking the lead, one focused on math, one on literacy, to invite our online teachers, particularly at the elementary level, to work together. So I think we have a number of different ways that teachers have been able to get that training.
And this is the Nearpod is just for teachers and administrators, not students.
Well, the students interact with Nearpod, absolutely.
Okay.
But it would be up to the teachers to sort of say, okay, there's this type of an interactive activity. You can draw on this. Here's how you do it. Or here's how you take the poll and answer the question, or that sort of thing. So the teachers sort of teach their students how to do each of the different types of activities. There's many different choices.
And I know that's a lot to add to what we're doing to learn a new system, but I'm grateful we have that opportunity to have it available to us. The other question I have deals with the consumable materials. And I was just wondering, I know that we talked about them taking things home, and when we talked about a drive-by to pick up, has there been any determination of families that might need a bus stop drop-off that don't have parents that don't have cars?
So each of our schools is really figuring out that consumable delivery process at the school level. So I'm very confident if a parent reached out and said, I can't make the drive-through, can you get it to me? I know many situations where they're dropped off on a front porch, or we arrange a special time for that family to come, or a family says, I can't drive through, can I walk up? Yes, we'll accommodate that. So each of our schools is making sure that the students get the consumables. So the in-person students, it goes home with them. The kids at home, they can arrange a drive-through schedule for that.
Okay, thank you. The other question deals with the revised social distancing document. Woo! So with the revision and the limit to social interaction, I'm sure that's impacting. So how does that play a picture in admin building that you're now restricted, and then teacher movement, you're now restricted?
So teachers aren't restricted in their movement. They can go around, do their business, wherever they need to go. The same with the ad building. If we need to go to a certain location or whatever, we're not restricted in movement. But we're saying anytime we have a meeting, unless it is a very, very brief interaction, that we want to do that virtually. And so we're typically either sitting in our own offices, or those who don't have their own offices are accessing conference rooms. We've set up monitors in conference rooms and so forth. So that's what that looks like. And it is allowing us to keep students in school and more students and adults in school in the event that we have quarantines. Every one adult that we can keep in school to be able to teach is important. And so that's why we're asking them to limit it whenever possible.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, I just want to say that I may not have said it earlier, but I'm very appreciative of the dashboard, because as I saw, it relieved my mind to know information is out there and that you're reporting it by the school, but you're also preserving the privacy of people. We have laws that tell you can't say what's wrong with people medically, but I'm grateful that if someone wants to know the numbers and the task of updating it daily and multiple times a day, thank you so much for that work. And thank you all. I appreciate it.
Judge Mays?
Thank you. And I appreciate the reports that we've been given today. I want to make sure Ms. Maury, do I understand that we are going to remote learning for middle school and high school?
So that decision hasn't been made yet. But what we did want to do is make sure that all of our students at all levels and our teachers and staff were prepared. Okay. In the event that the superintendent makes that difficult decision based on a variety of different factors and data out in the community as well as in our schools, they would be ready. So no, we have not made any decision. There's no dates. There's no decisions about that other than let's make sure we're prepared.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Judge Mays, this is Superintendent Macaluso. I would just clarify that. I would just reiterate that we're really in preparation mode. So we want to prepare all levels because as we continue to monitor the numbers in our community and across the state, we want to be prepared. Our goal is to keep our kids in school as long as possible, but when the benefits outweigh the risk, we want to be able to effectively transition when we need to.
Well, I just want to reiterate what I've said in the past, and that is how proud I am of our staff for being proactive rather than reactive and knowing what's going on. And I think that's one of the reasons, quite frankly, why we've had a great deal of success in keeping our kids safe and keeping our staff safe. Ms. Moore, you mentioned something about the question came up about childcare, and I like the idea about the possibility of taking your child with you to school if you have to and that sort of thing. I was at a meeting with over at City Council here a couple of weeks ago, and there was some talk about using some of, I think, their CARES money, providing child care for families that might not be able to afford it. Are there other options out there in the community that we're looking at? Because I know you mentioned in your presentation that, of course, you look at the total situation, see what options are out there and what's available. Is there anything else available out there other than if you're an employee of the district, you could bring your child to school, but what about other parents that may have difficulty in that? Is there something out there for those folks?
So there are other organizations in our community who do provide daycare. And I'm also going to ask Mr. Johnson just to talk about, we also have, we're in conversations right now with our Boys and Girls Club in the event that we would have to be learning from home. Ted, do you want to just update us a little on that?
I'm not sure Mr. Johnson is on the line, but I can certainly speak to that. I know that he's our contact with Boys and Girls Club, and we already have an existing partnership. And so even in the event of a quarantine or in the event of a stay-at-home, there's Mr. Johnson. I know that we are working in collaboration with the Boys and Girls Club to be able to provide those services because part of it is a daycare service in the event that parents would be in a hardship and would need that daycare. Mr. Johnson, are you with us now? I could see you. It looks like your microphone is unmuted, but we can't hear you, Mr. Johnson. You may have to check your, there you go. I think we can hear you now. Ted?
Is that, still can't hear me?
That's better.
Okay.
Nope, we can hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, I was actually talking to Boys and Girls Club, so I missed the question.
The question was, Judge Mays asked a question about what is out there in the community in terms of daycare in the event that our students would be fully distance learning. And so we brought up Boys and Girls Club as one of those examples.
Yes, and we do, to Superintendent Macaluso's point, we do have a partnership with them. We work very closely with them. They implement a number of health and safety guidelines and protocols when they run their programs. And so we would endeavor to work with them to allow them to keep providing those supports as much as possible.
Thank you. And finally, more of a statement rather than a question. And I think you've heard me mention this before, but things have gotten really bad in Pueblo. We've gotten terribly relaxed about what we're doing. Even though there are people out there that know why it's happening. When you go around the field and you see 300 kids out there with no masks and no social distancing and the adults encouraging them, what more are you going to expect from those folks? And, you know, with my conversations with people in the community, it's the ones that are being careless and flaunting the COVID rules that are responsible for the other stricter precautions that need to be taken. For instance, I have conversations with people who own restaurants. They say, we follow the rules and we are hurt by them because the place down the street doesn't follow the rules. They get a little slap on the hand, but they take home a whole lot of cash because they had more people in this restaurant than they were supposed to. There was no social distancing. So I just want to say once again, you know, and there's a huge responsibility on the public out there. I think we're doing a great job in the schools of keeping the kids safe. But, you know, it's my understanding, again, over the weekends with Halloween parties and other school parties and all that, let's get with it, folks. I mean, these things are real, whether you call it Halloween, Thanksgiving, or you just call it some ordinary weekend. It's not appropriate to have these full-scale parties and things going on. I know it's tough for everybody. It's tough for every single person that's involved in this thing. But unless we, the adults, accept the responsibility that we have and accept it with our children and other members in the community, it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. The belly aching is going to get harder, not easier. And we're the ones that hold the key to that, by the way. If we do what we're supposed to do in this community, we're going to go back down to the levels where we're going to be able to do things a little bit more freely. But if we don't, then we can expect the hammer to drop on us. And so I thank you for the opportunity to say that. And I don't in any way, shape, or form apologize for being as strong as I am in my feelings about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Mays, for expressing those words. You know, the ability to keep our schools open is directly tied to the economic viability of our community. It's tied to the well-being of our students, tied to the education outcomes of our students. And I want to commend all of our teachers and all of our administrators and our students and our parents who are attending in person. They are doing a phenomenal job with wearing their masks and social distancing and so forth. But as a community, we have to do better if we're going to continue to keep our schools open. I want to make it clear that our schools are not super spreaders. We're not spreading within our schools, but it's very, very difficult to be able to deal with irresponsible community actions pushing in on our school district. And so the disruption that we're experiencing with having to entertain positive cases and quarantines and so forth, it's a disruption. It's a hardship on our families for those students who need to be in person. And so we're doing the best that we can, but it's really getting more and more difficult. And so again, I would implore our community to continue to avoid interacting with others that are outside of your household, to do what we know works, which is wearing your mask, social distancing, and we have to be responsible because we do have to reduce the numbers in our community. The 2-week average positivity rate, the cumulative rate in our community is going in the wrong direction, and that's not going to have a positive impact on our schools. So again, that's why we are putting preparations in place in the event that we have to transition, and we'll make those decisions. You know, we have told our community that we're going to remain flexible, but it's getting harder and harder due to outside influences pushing in on our school districts. So just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Mr. Farrell, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing the information today. I appreciate it. I know I, as all of us, I'm sure, have been worried about this for since March, basically. And my worry keeps going up every time I see updates on what our community looks like as far as numbers, like the superintendent just mentioned. I know that this has been a big lift, continues to be a big lift, and will be a big lift moving forward, whatever happens. So I really want to express my appreciation at all levels of what everyone is doing to try to make this work for as long as it can. I appreciate the dashboard. I know a lot of work's going into that to keep it updated, especially more than once a week as things are changing all the time around us. I did have a couple of questions about our distance learning transition plan. And as if things go to the safer at home orange level, we're talking about distance learning for the students, staff still instructing from their classrooms. So I just wanted to confirm if the same accommodations that have been made for staff would still exist under those situations. Because I believe we have some staff members who are already working from home or have other accommodations. Do those stay in place as if things transition?
Yes, those would continue in place at that time.
Okay. And then our stricter social distancing guidelines, I assume those would stay in the buildings as well, since we will still have staff in those buildings, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that would be important, Mr. Farrell, because we want people to be able to feel safe in terms of working in their classroom with limited interaction with others. And we would also put those parameters in place when staff members had the need to bring their own children. We would, we wouldn't expect that students would be visiting other people's classrooms and so forth, right? We want to make sure that it's safe for individuals.
And the same existing accommodations that can be made if somebody needs to self-isolate or quarantine, they'll be able to transition if they need to, correct?
Yes. Absolutely.
I'm as I said, I'm worried, and I think we all are. And I just want to echo what we've heard already, that we can all do our part. I'm at home self-isolating because of a possible exposure, so I'm more aware than I was of what goes into contact tracing, what goes into the feeling of wanting to keep other people safe. And I just hope that as a community we can work together to keep each other safe. Thank you for all the work that's going into doing that.
Ms. Clementi, any questions?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to my colleagues for their questions, so I don't have to ask those. And I echo also their thanks to you, Superintendent Macaluso, and Ms. Maury, and all the entire District 60 staff with all that you're doing with this heavy lift. Here are my questions. It's my understanding that as a county, we're technically close to orange. If we're not in that orange part of the dial, basically we're not there, I think, because of variances. Does Mrs. Macaluso, do you have any information about that, or how close we are to be in the orange zone?
I think our numbers would indicate that we're in the orange zone or further than the orange zone. I think we're in a place where our county has submitted a mitigation plan. And so we have a very small window to implement that mitigation plan in order to bring those numbers down. That's where we are as a county.
Okay, so if we don't, as a county and community, heed those changes, we may soon be in orange or even in red. And I appreciate, Judge Mays, your passion about that and helping us all be focused on doing the right thing here. Next question: if we are, I know that you've done all the background work with transitioning even to stay at home. I just would like to be reassured that there's also planning for food distribution to our students if we do end up in that red zone.
Absolutely. Nutrition Services is always part of that transition plan. So they are working on the emergency feeding plan that would go along with any stay at home, even in the event that we have had to do a temporary operational school closure. Recently, they have worked a plan
to
accommodate families.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that and to make that point. Also, in terms of contact tracing and incident reporting and all of the work that you do at the district level, first of all, how does the district get notified of COVID cases or positive tests? How do we find out?
So as Mr. Bayer and Mr. Burns would probably also express is that sometimes the health department will contact us, sometimes families will contact us, school principals will contact us. So sometimes we will get a tip. Mr. Bayer and Mr. Burns, you can comment more on that, but it essentially comes from various places, but we always get the confirmation from the health department when we do the investigation.
So, but if someone doesn't tell us that they're positive, then the district really can't do anything until they hear from the health department about changing the dashboard or about notifying any cohorts or such. Is that right? Okay.
That would be correct.
Is it also true? I read on another district website that that schools and school districts should not disclose the names of students, teachers, or any kind of staff who are believed or who report themselves to be COVID positive. That we can't do that. That we can't, other than alerting the public health department, we can't call and say anything more than we believe you've been in contact with someone who has tested positive. We can't say you've been around so and so and that person or that student has the virus. Is that right?
That is correct. As a school district, we would always adhere to any legal guidelines, specifically HIPAA, FERPA, that sort of thing, to protect the privacy of students and individuals, any individual.
And so while I'm sure there are always rumors out about what's going on, the district cannot share that information, correct?
That is correct.
Good, thank you. I think it's really important because all of us want to be as transparent as possible, and all of us want as much information as we can get. But we have to do it within certain guidelines and appropriate boundaries. And so I'd like to be sure that everybody understands that those boundaries are there. And lastly, just as an aside, just before our meeting started, I saw the announcement that Cherry Creek schools will be going to full 100% remote because of just the kinds of things that we're talking about. So there's a big city, big school district that has had to make this decision. Thank you.
Superintendent Macaluso, can you just clarify for us what that communications process is? When we have a positive case, I know communications are sent out to the entire school community. Who is that exactly? What kind of communications? Is it an email? Is it phone calls? Can you just talk about that a bit?
Sure. So, and I could also allow Mr. Sprouse and Mr. Burns kind of weigh in on this. When we meet as a COVID team, we identify all the various communications that need to go out. So we communicate with specifically with the students and the families. Say it's a requirement of a quarantine. We're going to quarantine a cohort. We would identify those individuals. We would also identify all staff members in the school. Mr. Burns would be in direct contact with any staff members who would need to be quarantined, and he would speak with them individually. We would also inform the broader school community, even if they're not part of the quarantine, the entire school staff and student and families would be notified that there is actually a confirmed case and a quarantine happening in their school. Mr. Sprouse or Mr. Burns, if you have any other information, or if I forgot a step in the process.
I'll go ahead and jump in, and then Mr. Burns, if you want to talk more on the staff side of things. But absolutely, as was mentioned earlier by Board Member Clementi, a lot of times these notifications may be stirring around in the community, and it's at that point really basically a rumor. I mean, even if it's a confirmed positive case where we're at, we're not going to take any action until we get that confirmation from the health department. That doesn't mean we won't do anything. That means Mr. Bayer is going to be in contact with the health department, or Mr. Burns. They're talking to them multiple times a day as we work through these cases. But we have to verify that it is in fact a confirmed positive case before we start any notification process. At which point the schools will conduct their own contact tracing in conjunction with our COVID team that works with them to help them through that process. They pull together a list of the students and the staff that need to quarantine. That takes a little bit of time, but that list is eventually turned over to the team and to myself. In the meantime, I'm working in conjunction with, at the very minimum, the Assistant Superintendent, Suzanne Maury, to draft messaging that would go out. Our primary objective at that point is informing the cohort of students and the staff members that have to begin quarantining immediately. That's priority number one for us. And in some cases, when these positive cases arise during the school day, it's even more immediate, where we're needing parents to come and pick up their children so that they can begin their quarantine process at that point. If it does happen after hours, then we still have the objective of reaching out to the cohort of students and the staff members that are going to need to start quarantining at that time. Following that, we do send out a message, as the superintendent mentioned, to the greater school community, informing them that an individual at their school has tested positive, and that basically letting those families know that there was a case, but they would have been contacted if they were in close contact with the person with COVID-19. And so those people are quarantining, but for the rest of the school community, it's more of a effort of sharing that transparency to let them know that there was a confirmed case. And so we will be working on this as early as 7 in the morning to 9 at night, almost on a daily basis, really, and with multiple cases, unfortunately, that we're trying to work through every single day. But Mr. Burns, if you want to talk, I know you work directly with staff members that are that need more information in regards to their quarantining process.
Sure. Thank you for the very thoughtful question. Just as Superintendent Macaluso and Mr. Sprouse, the chair, I make that personal contact with each individual who's a staff member who has been identified needing to quarantine. I think it's important for us to establish early on that there is a connection with the Human Resources Office in the case they have questions as it relates to their position, to their work, to identifying how to code their absence in the system and whether they're going to be able to work or not. At times, to your question, Board Member Clemente, individuals will have a disclose to say, I heard from person so-and-so that he or she tested positive. In my response, I don't even use pronouns. I say he or she and continue to have the conversation as if we're speaking about a third person. And so really trying to be very careful and mindful about HIPAA and the employment privacy matters for an individual. And so even if somebody self-disclose a name of an individual, I don't respond to that and really maintain that the privacy per HIPAA and per other employment privacy matters. So through my effort, I'm going to be their first point of contact, continue to work with them during the quarantine, provide them with an individual in the Human Resources Office to share their symptoms, share their test results. They're under no obligation to do so. However, by sharing that information with us allows us to look at the larger public good of our school system and make sure that additional closures or quarantines don't need to go out as well. And I've found an incredibly supportive and welcoming staff that are sharing information with us as appropriate about their status, about their symptoms, and they're willing to share this information. I don't see any sort of caginess. Any information that is shared in paper format is not even held in their human resources file. It's in a different location per federal law. So making sure that we have the division between employment paperwork and then medical information as well. Throughout my conversations, sharing with them the PDPHE recommendations on quarantine status, what it means for household members, and when to get tested, and then testing locations as well. I'm typically then following up with individuals right prior to the end of their quarantine to see if they're establishing any, experiencing any symptoms, to see if they are on track to return on that given date as well. So at any given day, all of us are working very closely with a handful of staff members to ensure that we're meeting their needs, monitoring their symptoms, and giving them the information that they need to be successful as employees, either remotely or when they return.
President Voss, just to wrap up your other section of your question, what formats are they informed? And through my calling system, they're reached via phone, email, and text, and that's obviously only as good as the contact information they have on file. And so we are working on putting out a reminder to our staff at the very minimum to remind them that they need to consistently update their contact information in the employee portal. And we hope to get that out soon.
Great. Well, thank you for clarifying that process for me. And I think all of my other questions were answered earlier. So thank you for all the great information, and thank you for all the work that you're all doing. We really do.
Mr. Ross, may I ask a question of Ms. Morey, please?
Sure, sure.
Ms. Morey, you know, I have a kind of an empty place in my heart right now for the freshmen that have entered high school and have really not had the opportunity to experience what that really means. And the fact that even when they're in classes together, there's a social distancing and all that. So, I mean, the relationships are not the same as if we didn't have COVID-19. Are we, or is anybody working on a way to kind of bridge that socialization gap for these kids that, you know, I don't know, I guess what, they go home, maybe they get on the internet, or maybe they text or whatever, but in a broader sense, you know, about what the socialization process is with school and all the stuff that goes on. What was on TV last night? And by the way, this, that, and the other. Is there anything that's going on that might be able to fill what I consider to be a considerable gap in the whole high school experience, and well, quite frankly, the whole educational experience, but particularly with right now with these high school students, you know, in any event, I don't know, is my question clear, or is I'm just babbling? Don't say I'm babbling, okay?
Your question is clear, and your question's a really, really good one. Even last night we were meeting in DAC, and I'm not sure, Judge Mays, if you were in that particular DAC meeting, but we were talking about—
Would you please update me after the meeting that I was not there?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
But even last night, we were talking specifically about parent engagement, you know, in this online world. But a few of the ideas that schools were sharing involved students as well. There were a couple of good ideas I think that the high schools shared in order to bring families together, including students. But I think that that is something we need to continue to look at the school level. What can they orchestrate from the school to bring kids together? I think it's a great idea. We have talked about how do we do online virtual clubs. I'm not sure right now how many of those are up and running, especially with the later start of the high school students. But I do think that we're probably ready to really look at that in a more serious way. It's a really good point.
Judge Mays, I would just like to say that that is something that we are really, it holds a really special place in my heart also. I'm highly concerned about especially our ninth graders who have never, who have only stepped foot into our buildings for a few weeks, couple of weeks, and trying to make this transition to high school and earning credits and so forth. I'm really extremely concerned about the emotional well-being of our students and our academic achievement of our students, specifically our ninth graders. It's a conversation that my team is working on. I know that Marcy Imes, who serves as the secondary director, is working very collaboratively with our high school principals to come up with a plan because they're also concerned about it. We have also applied for some grant funding through some sources. We hope to hear in the next week or so in regard to those funding sources to be able to push in and provide some of that academic and emotional support. But it is something that we're really struggling with and we're really concerned about. High school brings very unique challenges. And so we're not able to cohort our students because of the nature of high school as easily as middle school and elementary school. So we are seeing some uptick in cases when we have to quarantine kids because our kids are active, right? They're on the cheerleading team, they're on the football team, and so we're just really monitoring some trends right now in regard to attendance rates at our high schools. We are also seeing some requests for in-person students at the high school to go to distance learning, and for various reasons. I think some students are probably saying this isn't what I thought it would be, right? Because there are less kids here, we have to social distance, that sort of thing. Other kids are involved in sports and other activities, and through nature of the quarantinings, they're a casualty of that. So if they go to in-person classes and they're in direct contact with somebody who may be positive, then they have to quarantine for 2 weeks. And then that jeopardizes their ability to not only go to in-person class, but also to participate in their extracurricular activities. And so I think our kids and our families are really struggling with this need to go in person and need to do it virtually, and just a lot of different elements that we're monitoring. So it's difficult right now, but we're gonna continue to work on it because that is really a concern.
President Voss, I have a follow-up question, if I may. This is probably for Mr. Sprouse or Mr. Bayer, Mr. Burns. We talked about the timeline of communication and kind of what steps that we go through, but can you give me a rough estimate? I know it's different case by case, and sometimes it's weekends or nights or during the school day. Can you give me typical timeline of you get a report? How long does it take from the report to get a confirmation? How long does it take from the confirmation to get out notice to the cohort? And how long does it take after the cohort's notified to notify the larger school community?
Mr. Baird, do you want to jump in there a little bit?
Mr. Sprouse, you're muted.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. I mean, this is because we want to make sure that this process is confirmed with the health department and make sure we have good, accurate information. It could take several hours to go through this entire process, depending on how big the cohort is, who's involved with it. It could take several hours, you know, and so it goes as fast as how big the situation is. But we've seen some go as the whole entire process go from an hour and a half to three hours. You know, that's what I've seen notice. So, and that's each case. And then each of these, like they talked about, sometimes we're doing 3, 4, 5 of these a day, and that we're coming up with. So it is time intensive. But I think like we talked about, the important thing is to try to get out the information as in a timely manner as we possibly can, as fast as we possibly can. So there's never been a time yet where we haven't got, when we've got information where the school has not been notified by the next day. They know not to show up the next day. Most of the time it's within a couple hours that we can turn this around, but we've never had to say we're going to stop our system and then try to investigate it. We're working this system the whole time, the whole process, and then we want to make sure it's done in a timely manner. But it's fast. I mean, we're working fast to try to get it out, the information as fast as we possibly can. We have a dedicated team with the health department, like I talked about. So we're constantly talking to them. Hey, can you confirm this? I have this information. What do you need? What does that look like? You know, and so we get that confirmation, that immediate process done. So that's kind of what I have. But it's a timely process. But we work it as fast as we possibly can. But it is involved.
Just
The one thing
to that, you know, it's about having accurate contact tracing, and to do that the right way, we need to be very diligent in our approach. And when Mr. Bayer is working with the principals, they're being very careful in that process, and then also submitting a detailed spreadsheet of information that's turned over to the health department. And then that list needs to be recreated in a custom group in the messagings that I send out. And so, as Mr. Bayer said, you know, it's really kind of each case is different. We try to get it out as quickly as possible. And I think we're doing a good job at it. You know, we'll jump on, we'll get a text message that says, you know, a Google Meet conference call in 15 minutes. And you know what? Everybody's there. And no matter what day of the week it is, what hour that text comes in, this team's doing I mean, I'm just proud to be involved with the work that they're doing, because everyone is lifting each other up. And that's ultimately what the theme is of this year that our superintendent chose. And we're proving that we're on board.
I just want to reiterate that this team really has been dedicated and really works around the clock. I know that I've said that many times, but I don't think it could be underestimated. This is a very small team. It's been very taxing. This is an additional, it feels like additional 3 whole jobs that they've taken on, in addition to continuing to do the jobs that they, you know, they're tasked with. There are districts who, when they receive a positive COVID case, they close the school immediately, regardless of who needs to be quarantined or not. They close the school to allow them time to investigate. Our team doesn't do that. Our team works around the clock, regardless of what day it is, whether it's Friday night, Thursday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, to ensure that we minimize the disruption to kids and school closures and so forth. So I really do appreciate our team and their dedication to this process, because it really has been a heavy lift.
Thank you for the answer.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll move on now to the 2019-2020 fourth quarter financial report.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Dave Horner, who serves as our CFO, and he is going to give us an overview on the fourth quarter report. And I think, will you be sharing your screen, Mr. Horner?
Yes, I plan on sharing my screen here in just a second. So good afternoon. I know this is not quite as exciting topic what we just covered. I believe everybody can see my chart bar graph, I hope. We're good. All right. So this is considered unaudited fourth quarter. The reason that you don't get the fourth quarter until late like this every year is we have already been audited. So they really are audited numbers, but they aren't accepted by you until you receive the report in January. There may be a slight minor adjustment as it goes through the rest of the audit process, but this is considered unaudited numbers as far as that goes until the board accepts it. We're in good shape. Bottom line, that's my quick version of this. In 1920, we had revenues that came in at 99.4% of our budget. In 1819, we actually collected more than we budgeted, but the years are definitely totally different. I think the key thing I want to talk about here is, as soon as I can get down to it, is we look at the fourth quarter expenditures. If you remember back after we went out on COVID leave and distance learning and all of our fine spring activities, we put a freeze on for spending, but we continued to pay salaries and benefits for all of our employees throughout the year. And get this to come on up just a little bit further there. We ended up that the fourth quarter expenditures in 1819 was 97.3% of budget, but in 1920 it was only 89.9%. So we did save money. And as we look at what that does to our ending fund, which I'll pull up in just a second, but what you'll notice is we have 63.2% in salaries here on the pie graph and 22.4% for 85.6%. Normally we're in the lower 80% in our expenditures for payroll. Primarily that's because we quit spending over here in the supply side and things last spring. So what we did spend becomes a larger percentage of that. I'm going to pull down here to show you one other item. This in your packet showed you as compared to the budget line items and things, you can see the different expenditures as we go. But the one thing that I want to bring to your attention, which is like a couple more pages down here, don't want to make everybody dizzy with my speed dialing, but in 1819, we ended up with a 9% reserve. At the end of 1920, we have 11% reserve, which was intentional, that we reduce spending, which then drops to our reserves. And we also ended up, there is some we spent money on items that will, like some of the curriculum items, which we can't expense in the current year. We have to expense them over time because you can't prepay, 5 years worth of curriculum out of the year, even though we did pay it. So it becomes part of our ending fund balance, and then we use it up over time so that, we actually don't have 11%, but we are well within the ranges of your target of 9%, even with those other items, if you pull them out. So I'm very pleased with where we ended up the year. You will receive the first quarter's report. It's already up for your November 17th board meeting. I couldn't quite get it together to have both of them today, but I'm very comfortable with where we're at the end of the year, especially dealing with all the COVID pieces. And in the next report, you'll find all of the additional COVID reporting and things. I think we're getting it under control, and feel like we're very good control of our finances and going from there. I'm open to any specific questions you have or concerns, and we see if we can address them.
Dr. Wright, any questions?
I do not, but thank you, Mr. Horner.
Judge Mays?
No, thank you.
Mr. Farrell?
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Clementi?
Surprise, I don't have any questions either. Thank you, Mr. Horner.
And none for me either. So thank you, Mr. Horner.
Okay.
We'll move on now to 10.0 policy.
Thank you. I believe these policies are coming forth from Mr. Horner.
All right, I was not going to put them all up on the screen. We have 3 policies that we're really dealing with. One of them is DJE, which is just changing the shall to will, the items that I know are thrilled by our school teacher.
There you go, Barb.
The 2 real things are the federal procurement. We never had a real policy related to federal procurement, and with some of the rules that changed, it's recommended that we have a real federal procurement policy, and that's going to become DJB. And then there will be a DJBR, which are the procedures that go with that. We currently do have DJB and DJBR, which are just procurement procedures, and we will change the numbering of those. And that's why you'll see in the motion as it's going forward, allowing us to move some of these other policies up the chain 1 notch so that we can fit these federal procurement policies in where they're recommended to be. So this would be a first reading on these policies to include the federal requirements as we get grants and things that are federally funded. So I would be open for any questions that you have.
All right, Dr. Wright?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Judge Mays?
No, thanks.
Mr. Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Horner, for explaining the offset of existing versus new and the renumbering. That was my question, but you explained it. So nothing else. Thank you.
Ms. Clementi?
Well, Mr. Horner, you have already mentioned my objection, and other than that, I have no questions. I appreciate your work on these.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. We'll move on to JBI.
Thank you. And I believe that Mr. DeCicero, Executive Director of Human Resources, will bring forth this policy, and this is for first reading.
Yes, good afternoon again, everybody. This policy is a new policy, GBI, which has come about. It's a CASB recommended policy that we don't currently have in place due to some legal requirements that are embedded in some statutes around how we really are the caretakers of CBI criminal history records. There's also audits that are being completed across the state. Our department just recently completed one. We anticipate feedback from them will also be to implement this policy, so we're being proactive in that regard. And really, it's very specific to my department as we are the keepers of this information. And it really just gives us some guidance and policy around how that information is secured and how it's disseminated and how we manage the caretaking of those records. And it'll just enhance our processes moving forward. But once again, it is a new policy, brand new to our district, CASB recommended, and I'd be willing to entertain any questions that you may have.
Dr. Wright? Sorry, Dr. Wright, we couldn't hear you. Nothing. Judge Mays?
No, thank you.
Mr. Farrell?
No questions, thank you.
And
I'm good. Thanks.
I'm okay too. Thank you. We'll move on to 11.0, the consent agenda. Are there any consent agenda items anyone would like removed to be voted on separately?
I do not, but I have a couple of questions about one.
Sure.
This it's about the SRO agreement conversation we had per COVID. There's a section in the agreement that says that it talks about, I'll just paraphrase it, but it sort of says that this is what our agreement is printed here. And one of the things that we talked about in terms of discipline, I didn't see anything about the parameters of operation with discipline with the SRO and the boundaries. That was something we had a conversation prior to COVID. We were talking about in person, looking at our disciplinary practices. Is this supposed to be included in this document, or is that another document? Thank you.
I think the role of our school resource officers falls within various policies that we have in regard to, they really have no role in terms of discipline of our students. Their primary role is for safety within our schools and to build relationships. So that is separated within the policies that we have, and that's not specifically outlined within this document. I don't believe that it has been previously, but Mr. Bump could weigh in on that.
Mr. Voss, President, members of the board, and Superintendent Macaluso, I think that statement is correct. The SRO agreement is more for the safety of students and how we interface with the police department. The policies that we have under student conduct deal with how the students are disciplined. It may be that we'll get a report from an SRO, but from that point forward, in terms of how that affects the student in the school, it's up to the administration.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I just need one more clarification, please. In looking at community engagement, there's a section that talks about school closure plan. It's in attachment number 2, and it talks about the SRO working with downtown homeless population and Pueblo mall shoplifting. I just wanted to know how that related to D60. Thank you. I think it's a great thing, so don't misunderstand me. I was just trying to see how it related to our involvement with the community.
So I can address that, I think, and then maybe Mr. Bear is also a good resource here. We were concerned that if we had to go totally remote learning, that we would not have anybody in our schools. And so we didn't, since the city of Pueblo relies upon this budget and the money that we're going to pay their SROs, they're actually committed officers, as you know. We wanted to be able to kind of think of some alternative things that they might do that would still support the mission of the school district, even though they weren't actually in the schools themselves. So I think Mr. Bear, in working with the chief of the SRO staff, has talked about what those might look like and has indicated in the agreement itself, these are just things that we would maybe possibly consider. They would not be obligations, but the whole point of it, I think, is that we'll have close communication with the law enforcement so that we can use their resources to the best advantage that we can, even though the students may not be in school. Mr. Bear, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Mr. Bump hit the nail on the head with that. I think it's about trying to come up with a plan that utilizes these resources to the best extent as possible for not only the schools, the community, and everybody else involved. But I think this is like it says in the contract. This is a non-exhaustive list that we can revisit at any point in time. If we need additional services, we need extra help, something else comes up, we shift back to online, partially online, partially in person again. we're going to reevaluate it at any point in time. So this is a starting list to start the conversation, so we can start to build on what the community needs are, what our school needs are.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the clarification.
I will move that we approve consent agenda items 2 through 8 as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clemente,
Aye.
Mr. Farrell,
Aye.
Judge Mays,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Dr. Wright.
Aye.
We'll move on now to 12.0 action items. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. So before you, for these action items are 4 separate resolutions, 2 each for 2 for Franklin and 2 for Sunset Park, approving the site lease and sublease for the best grants. And I don't know if Mr. Lawson, Mr. Lawson or Mr. Horner had any additional information, but these are separate resolutions for action.
These are what are required from the BEST program, and the wording is basically set by the BEST program and has been drawn up by our 2 attorneys. And we need the approval of the board so we can continue with our BEST program.
These documents are the last component of the due diligence phase, post-election documents that were required by CDE and the Attorney General's office.
This is Barb. I have a procedural question. Do we need 4 separate votes on these because they are very similar? Or can we combine them into 1 or 2 actions?
I recommend that you adopt them 4 separately. We started out with trying to combine these at one point, and the best grant folks are suggesting to us that we have a record of having separate resolutions. That's why we have.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Voss, may I?
Sure.
I move the Board of Education adopt and approve the resolution authorizing the State of Colorado Building Excellence Schools Today Franklin School of Innovation Project site lease and sublease, a tax compliance certificate, and other documents and actions related thereto, all in connection with the BEST grant and as presented in the today, November 5th, 2020 board materials.
Okay, second.
Any discussion?
I'm assuming that that is sufficient and we do not need to read the entire resolution into the record.
Well, that's correct. We can read this by title only, and the reason that we put a very specific resolution.
And Jake, you're kind of, I couldn't hear you at the end.
You are correct. We wanted to be sure that we read it by title only, and therefore we quoted exactly the heading of the resolution itself and included it in the background material so the board has the resolution before it and knows what it's voting on.
I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clemente,
Aye.
Mr. Farrell,
Aye.
Judge Mays,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Dr. Wright.
Aye.
Ms. Clemente, did you just want to keep going with those?
Great. I move the Board of Education adopt and approve the resolution amending and restating that certain resolution adopted on September 22nd, 2020, authorizing the issuance by Pueblo School District number 60 of a general obligation bond, Series 2020B, for the purposes approved at the district's election on November 5th, 2019, and authorizing the levy of property taxes to pay such bond, providing the form of the bond and other details in connection therewith, and approving other documents relating to the bond, and to provide matching monies to the state of Colorado for the BEST project, Franklin School of Innovation BEST project, as presented in tonight's board materials.
I second.
Any discussion? I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi,
Aye.
Mr. Farrell,
Aye.
Judge Mays,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Dr. Wright.
Aye.
Moving on, I move the Board of Education adopt and approve the resolution authorizing the state of Colorado Building Excellent Schools Today Sunset Park Elementary School project, site lease and sublease, a tax compliance certificate, and other documents and actions related thereto, as presented in the November 5th, that would be today, 2020, board materials.
Second.
Discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi,
Aye.
Mr. Farrell,
Aye.
Judge Mays,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Dr. Wright.
Aye.
And
Voss, did
finally,
we record a second in that motion?
yes, Tommy Farrell.
Mr. Trone, okay. Thank you.
I provided one. Hopefully you could hear
And
it.
I want to make sure we had a second on the first resolution. Did somebody do that?
You did, Dr.
Yes, Dr. Wright.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, number 4. I move the Board of Education adopt and approve the resolution authorizing the issuance by Pueblo School District number 60 of a general obligation bond, Series 2020C, for the purposes approved at the district's election on November 5th, 2019, and authorizing the levy of property taxes to pay such bond, providing for the form of the bond and other details in connection therewith, and approving other documents relating to the bond. Sorry, I lost my place. And to provide matching monies to the state of Colorado for the Sunset Park Elementary School Best Project, as presented in tonight's board materials.
Second.
Discussion? I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi,
Aye.
Mr. Farrell,
Aye.
Judge Mays,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Dr. Wright.
Aye.
Next up on the agenda, we have executive session. So I will move that the Board of Education will meet in executive session to discuss determining positions relative to matters that are or will be subject to contract negotiations, other than collective bargaining contracts, developing strategy for those negotiations, and instructing negotiators pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, Prim 4, Prim E, and personnel matters, including the superintendent's evaluation and actions, updates, and superintendent recommendations involving individual employees pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, Prim 4, Prim F.
Second.
I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi,
Aye.
Mr. Farrell,
Aye.
Judge Mays,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Dr. Wright.
Aye.
And we will be adjourning from executive session, so we won't be returning to this meeting. And we
Thank
have
you.
another link for everyone to join, so we'll see you there.